The amount of friends and family that have moved away but then have moved back to Fort Collins to raise a family and live their life as a profession and grow old, I'm just gonna have to take them at their word that Fort Collins is as amazing as I think it is. One of the things that I always tell people is the thing I lack most when people are moving to Fort Collins, Northern Colorado, is perspective. I am born and raised here, and all but 9 months of my life I have lived in Fort Collins, Colorado. And even for those 9 months, I lived on the north side of Fort Collins. It took about 20 minutes to get to Old Town Square when I worked down there a decade ago. But today's video is talking to you about all things living in Fort Collins, Colorado 2023. And even over the last year, there have been substantial changes. And what does it look like, feel like, and the history, and what is Fort Collins about? And that's what this video is going to talk to you guys about. What's up, everybody? My name is Patrick Soukup with Soukup Real Estate Services here in Fort Collins, Colorado. And this is the Living in Fort Collins YouTube channel. If you're new to the channel, it talks to you about everything there is to know. Eat, sleep, play, living in Fort Collins, Colorado. Now, if at the end of the video you've enjoyed it, give it a comment, thumbs up, maybe even share it with a friend. And as much as we like making these YouTube videos, we are licensed real estate agents in the state of Colorado. So give us a call, text, or email if you are considering moving here or selling in Northern Colorado. Now, without any further delay, let's jump into today's video, Living in Fort Collins, Colorado 2023. Let's go. Now, I'm actually reading a pretty fun history book on the city of Fort Collins, and it is a city. No, definitely no longer a town. It is a growing city. Currently, population 175,000 people, growth rate about 1.5% annually, with an expected population of about 250,000 people by 2040. So it is a growing city. Now, as much as 250,000 people in the next 20 years doesn't sound like much, when you take into consideration really the surrounding areas, the metropolitan of Northern Colorado, Fort Collins, Loveland, Greeley, Johnstown, Windsor, Wellington, Timnit, you start to get closer to, 500,000 people, and that really starts to kind of boat itself to bigger events and venues and businesses and the Costcos of the world, the Walmarts, the Fortune 500 companies that are here, stock companies, stock exchange companies that are here, and Woodward Governor, Broadcom, HP. It is a pretty decent size area with 500,000 people here when you really take into consideration all of the surrounding areas. But yes, Fort Collins itself is under 200,000 people currently, but is considering itself, a pretty quickly growing community. And I was joking with Janae, my wife, Janae, I was joking with her because I'm reading this book, this history book on Fort Collins, and it talks about its kind of founding in the late 60s, early 70s, and how there was just 500 people to vote, and then 1,500 to 5,000. Then the college, CSU, Colorado A&M College came, an agricultural school, and that was really the takeoff point. That and the railroad that cuts through Fort Collins on Mason Street, really the takeoff point for city of Fort Collins to grow alongside Denver. And grow it has over the last 150 years, from a community that my parents moved to here in the 1960s, when as far south as Fort Collins was growing was Prospect Road. We are a grid-like community where our major streets are north and south, east and west exactly, and they're all separated by 1 mile. So we have, heading from the west side to east side, Overland Trail, Taft, Shields, College, LeMay, Timberline, and then Ziegler is starting to really see some growth on our southeast side of town. And then going from north to south, we've got Vine that is becoming a pretty decent sized street. We've got Mulberry, Prospect, Drake, Horsetooth, Harmony, and then we're even seeing some some growth over there on Trilby and then Carpenter as well. So we are a pretty easily navigated community. I-25 runs along our east side. It's really kind of our economic artery from what, the Chamber of Commerce is suggesting, from here until, to Denver. And that's been the same since the 1870s, when we were really a farming and ranch community. Cattle and sheep farmers that would take our livestock down to the Denver shows. And that still continues to this day. A lot of our business comes to and from Denver. I wouldn't say there's a ton of commuters necessarily, but there are some. A lot of people might live in Windsor or Greeley to afford the housing, but then commute to Fort Collins and or Denver or different areas along that I-25 corridor. But Fort Collins, the economic, health is, it's very strong with the Colorado State University CSU Rams, one of our leading employers. Then followed up by, we've got the city of Fort Collins that's housed here, Larimer County offices out of Fort Collins. And then we do have strong healthcare as well with the UC Health and Banner Health as well. So those are kind of our leading industries as far as economy goes. We are pretty diversified though from there. Some major employers to take into consideration and take note of are Woodward Governor, Broadcom, Otterbox, Madwire. We have a small burgeoning tech scene, not necessarily big. We have some co-working spaces. Actually there's a place downtown called Spaces for co-working areas, but nothing like that has necessarily taken off like it has kind of in the bigger metro areas down in Denver. We're 45 minutes to the north of Denver, on the north side of Denver, about an hour and a half to DTC, Denver Tech Center, about 50 to 60 minutes to DIA. E470 was a godsend. I remember growing up as a kid, going to DIA, having to go down to I-70, and yes, maybe it's similar time, but more mileage as far as things of that nature goes, and especially traffic. For me, I'd rather haul ass on E470 going 75 miles an hour than sit in traffic and on I-70 and make your way that way and save the few bucks, the toll roads that E470 charges. But we're then an hour to the south of Cheyenne, and Cheyenne's a very, interesting place right now. I don't know if this is true, but have heard it's going to be the Nashville of the West of, Wyoming and Colorado. I've driven through Cheyenne quite a few times. Not the prettiest of places, but if it becomes the Nashville of the West, well, by golly, that'll see Fort Collins, get sandwiched between Denver, very desirable place to live, and then Nashville of the West and Cheyenne. So we'll see. Not going to bank on that by any means, but Fort Collins has definitely seen a significant amount of growth, a lot due to its desirability of a place to live. In the early 2000s, Money Magazine named Fort Collins the #1 place to live, and it continues to get great ratings and reviews for best drinking water. There's a video that I talked to about all the lists that it has made over the years. And just recently, Forbes actually has ranked Fort Collins as the #1 city in the state of Colorado to live. They looked at things of, median price of homes, population, economy, unemployment, crime rate, things of that nature. And Fort Collins ranked #1. So let's go on that as well. But with all of that, all of this growth, is happening and occurring, and it's something that really we can't fight off or fend off, but there is a unique perspective here at Fort Collins. And if you've ever been on the Nextdoor app, it's funny, I was talking with a client and she goes, I'm not on there. It is about as unhealthy of an app as you can get. Just so much anger and people are mad and mean all the time. And I got on there to actually try to look at some different content ideas of what people are asking about here in Fort Collins. What do they want to know? What are people talking about? And I got on there, and currently, and I've done just two videos on the land development code, and that's a massive real estate change to the city of Fort Collins. Now, this was dictated by the housing strategic plan, the carbon footprint, kind of the emissions, gas emissions, the housing plan, and others kind of dictated what this land development code change was. But it really is a house divided. And what I mean by that is Fort Collins, really over the last 20 years has grown exponentially. Even when I was born, we had under 100,000 people here, and now we're close to 200,000. So it almost doubled in my lifetime, and probably going to double again, over the next 50 years. And that all being said, you have these people who have been here for, maybe 100 years, but my parents have been here for 60 years of its 150-year life. So a significant amount of time, but a lot of people have moved here since that article in the 2000s Money Magazine came out and have made it their home. And one of the things that we're seeing are a lot of people wanting to add to Fort Collins and not necessarily leech from it. When I was driving to school in the mornings, when I was in the early, in the 1990s, we would look for out-of-state license plates. And if we saw, now I lived on Horsetooth and LeMay, and I went to school in Old Town, so it was probably about a 15-minute drive, 10 to 15-minute drive. We would see about 1 to 3 license plates. Like we'd point them out. Me and my neighbor, we'd carpool, and we'd point them out, and that would be, pretty exciting for us to see a new license plate, Texas, New York, whatever that might be. But now you drive along College Avenue and you see, it seems like just as many license plates from out of state as you do from in state. So we have had this just melting pot of people coming from all over the country over the last 20 years, from Florida, North Dakota, Iowa, Boston, New York, Seattle, Texas, Louisiana, Arizona, Las Vegas, all over the country. And we've helped a lot of these people, move here. And a lot of the people that we work with are phenomenal people. So we are very lucky and grateful to call them clients. And we feel like that's kind of the general philosophy of people wanting to move here. They move here because people are always smiling and happy and waving to you and wanting to be a part of the community and give back and volunteer. But you also have this contingent of people who have been here for 50, 60, 100 years and has seen Fort Collins just grow like crazy, and maybe not necessarily want the population growth, but they don't want the traffic, the lines at the stores, the sold out type of situations that might happen when you have more people buying stuff or more people sitting in cars. But recently we had this land development code change, which definitely feel free, watch those 2 videos. They are great about what's changing. But you have this group that has been started, what is called Preserve Fort Collins Group. And it's essentially talking to everybody about, hey, why we shouldn't have this new change take place. But one of the things that I think Fort Collins is phenomenal for is forward thinking, and acting on things. An example would be, if you drive through Fort Collins, it's one of the most beautiful communities in northern Colorado. Personally, yeah, I mean, I'm born and raised here. I'm always gonna, vote for Fort Collins. But you drive through. Let's just take it from the south to north, right? Berthoud or Longmont, a little bit more, I-25, or sorry, not I-25, a highway. Can't think of the highway right now, but highway cutting through Longmont, and then you jump on 287 as well, and that's also cutting through Longmont. And you come north and you see Berthoud, which is a cool little community growing. And then you got Loveland, again, growth, but same things with the city plan, the city layout that aren't super desirable, but in its own right, some cool things like the Foundry and things of that nature that we've done some vlogs on. And then you hit Fort Collins. You really hit about Carpenter Road, and Fort Collins becomes, in your vision, and you see what the beauty is, from the medians to the well-maintained streets to the eye line. And what I mean by eye line is, your vantage point. In the 60s, the city of Fort Collins undergrounded all of the utilities and required that moving forward for all of the development. So you're not going to see any electrical lines or power lines running throughout the city, and it just really makes for a really amazing viewpoint. And so you see the mountains and you see all the beauty that there is, the fall foliage, without the power lines that are kind of breaking up the view. Now there are power lines here, don't get me wrong. There's just a dramatic decrease from what you kind of expect from a city. So it's just this gorgeous city, and people are taking care of it and maintaining it. And there's this Preserve Fort Collins land development code change that are wanting to see it remain the same. And don't get me wrong, like, I think that Fort Collins has this cool vibe to it. You know, Walt Disney, Harper Goff, you know, took some inspiration from Fort Collins, the buildings, and created Main Street Disneyland. So, you know, there's just this really cool, fun thing to experience when you come through Fort Collins. And there's this conversation and this kind of figuring out of who we are. We're definitely not a small town, definitely not a large city, but, you know, a city nonetheless, growing with a lot of people wanting to move here and trying to navigate that, negotiate that. And this land development code change is something to where the city has taken a stance based off of these kind of strategic plans, housing, traffic, roads, and city plans, and built the new land development code change. And some big things, just high level, ADUs can be allowed anywhere. Duplexes or triplexes can be built on any lot. No more neighborhood reviews. A few other things: parking limitation or parking reductions for studios and one bedrooms when building apartments, to really try to increase the density, public transportation, decrease the greenhouse emissions, give affordable housing. Those are kind of the dictating factors. And there's people that are happy about it, people that aren't happy about it, people that have moved here and are happy about it, people who have moved here and are not happy about it. And it gets down to a lot of different discussions, but regardless, seemingly it is going to happen. People will build ADUs in their backyard. There might be a duplex next to your house, you know, in an area that you might not necessarily expect a duplex. I personally think that, yes, there's going to be some bad actors that, you know, get as dense as possible, but I think the majority of people are going to try to do it tastefully. You still have to go through the City of Fort Collins review process, which is daunting to say the least. Ask any builder here in Northern Colorado. It is not easy, and they are very strict, and they are going to require the most high standards, but reduce maybe the reviews, exclusively speaking about the neighborhood review. But that being said, the impact of housing, of potentially 50% increase of housing supply over the next 20 years, does that take effect? I don't know. But the intentionality behind Fort Collins getting to be more of a dense around public transportation areas, get fewer cars on the roads, buses, ride shares, all of those things. Fort Collins is a doer. Again, speaking about those utility lines in the 1960s, we passed a utility broadband over the last few years, Fort Collins Connections, which now supplies gigabyte plus speed to all homes in Fort Collins, all single-family detached homes. They're working towards commercial and apartments right now with gigabyte plus speed for less than $70 per month. I personally have it and I love it. And it's one of these things where, you know, again, starting from the beginning of this video, I take for granted. I don't know how amazing it is, how safe the downtown area is on a Friday night at 8 o'clock. I can take my kids to the splash pad during the summer and not have to worry about transients or homeless. Maybe a few, but not necessarily anything crazy. City of Fort Collins Police does a great job. The businesses, there's nonprofits like Fort Collins Outreach that does kind of the work between police officers and, you know, some citizen help, so that these people can get maybe the help they need, understand the position that they're putting other people in. But, you know, to driving down Old Town when all the Christmas lights are on, you know, hundreds of thousands of LED lights light up Old Town Fort Collins, downtown Fort Collins, pretty much from the first week of November until Valentine's Day. And you live just in this Christmas card, Hallmark card of a city. And I just understand that it's an amazing place that I don't want to move my family from. We just recently decided to stay in our house. We were considering moving and buying some land, but we thought about it and we're like, why? We are in an amazing neighborhood, great schools. Poudre School District is phenomenal. People are moving all over the area to be around and in the Poudre School District. Very well funded. Taxes are fair. Insurance rates are decent as far as for home, auto. Yes, the cost of housing is absolutely increased, especially with interest rates, and it does put a hindrance on people being able to afford here, especially those that have been born and raised here, because yes, we have seen an 18% increase in our income since 2020, from about $95,000 to $110,000 for the area median income, according to the housing urban development. But there's still not this high paying job availability here necessarily in Fort Collins, but there are tons of people who are remote working, bringing their jobs that are paying them Bay Area incomes or high-level tech incomes, but they want to work from Fort Collins. And the city Fort Collins, with the connections, is definitely providing for that. But that is definitely something to take into consideration, is the affordability, is something that is kind of a conversation and is tough and difficult. So don't get me wrong, something that if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer. But we decided to stay in our house, our neighborhood, with such an amazing park nearby with Fossil Creek Park, all the schools, the trails, the off-street paved trails, over close to 40 miles worth of paved trails throughout Fort Collins, and over 200 miles of, I believe 280 miles actually, of dedicated bike and walking lanes and trails throughout Fort Collins. So, you take all of these things into consideration, and again, I take it for granted, but then I have best friends and cousins move back to start their families and say, hey, it's just an amazing community. And I am grateful and happy that I'm living in Fort Collins, especially moving into 2023. Excited to see what the Land Development Code does do and change, and how the city of Fort Collins navigates moving forward into the future. My confidence is that it's an amazing community, amazing city. The people that are moving here are doing a great job. The people that are from here will continue to do a great job and develop and grow this amazing community we have. So until next time, Living Fort Collins 2023. Take care.